My child, I want to speak to you today about something that has been taken from you without your full awareness of the taking. Something that was designed as one of my greatest gifts to you, and that has been reframed by the world around you and sometimes by the religious culture that was supposed to point you toward me into something shameful and inadequate and spiritually suspect. I want to speak to you about rest. Not the concept of rest as an approved theological principle, the actual experience of rest, the genuine stopping and the genuine stillness and the genuine releasing of the forward motion that your body and your spirit and your mind have been needing for longer than you have given yourself permission to acknowledge. And I want to say something to you that I need you to actually receive rather than pass over on the way to the next obligation. Your rest is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not a failure of faith or a lack of dedication or a spiritual deficiency that needs to be overcome with more effort. Your rest is where I restore you. It is one of the primary locations of my most significant work in your life, and the continued depriving of yourself of it is not faithfulness. It is the refusal of a gift I designed specifically for you. I know what the voice in your head says about rest. I have heard it. I have heard it. I know the specific form it takes in you, the particular way it has been shaped by everything you have absorbed from the culture of productivity that surrounds you, from the specific messages of the people and the institutions that formed you, from the particular wounds and the particular fears that have made stopping feel dangerous. The voice says, there is too much to do. The voice says, other people are further ahead and moving faster, and you cannot afford to slow down. The voice says, rest is for when everything is finished, and everything is never finished. The voice says, the people who are counting on you cannot afford for you to stop. The voice says, your value is measured by your output, and resting is not producing output, and therefore resting is not valuable. I know that voice. I have been listening to it speak over you for a long time, and I want to address it directly and replace what it has been saying with what is actually true. The world you live in measures worth by productivity. It assigns value to effort and output and the visible achievement of visible results. And this measurement has seeped into how you understand yourself, how you evaluate your own worth, how you assess whether a day was good or wasted. The day that was fully productive is the good day. The day that included genuine rest is the day that needs to be justified. The day that produced a list of what was accomplished alongside the rest, so that the rest can be defended as reasonable rather than simply received as the gift it was. And this has produced in you a person who is chronically behind on the rest that was designed to sustain the life, who pushes through when the body and the spirit are signaling that pushing through is no longer serving what it is supposed to serve, who mistakes the exhaustion of sustained effort for the faithfulness of sustained commitment. I did not design you for that. I want to say that clearly and without qualification. I did not design you to operate without genuine rest. I designed your body to require it, and your spirit to need it, and your mind to depend on it, not as a weakness in the design, but as a feature of it, a built-in rhythm that I wove into the very structure of what it means to be human. When I rested on the seventh day, it was not because I was tired. It was because I was modeling something, establishing a rhythm, demonstrating that the stopping is part of the design and not a concession to limitation. I built the rhythm of rest into the architecture of creation, because I knew what my image bearers would need in order to sustain the life I was giving them. And I knew that without the modeling and the instruction and eventually the command, the tendency of the driven heart would be to keep going past the point where the going is producing what it is supposed to produce. The rest I am speaking of is not irresponsibility. It is not the abandonment of what matters or the neglect of what requires your faithful engagement. It is the specific and intentional choosing to stop, to receive, to allow the replenishment that the continued giving requires, to let the interior go quiet enough to receive what I have been trying to give in the noise and the motion. It is the trust that says, I can stop because what I am building does not depend on my continuous effort to sustain it. It is the faith that releases the forward motion long enough to be genuinely restored before resuming it. And it is the obedience that says, "You designed me for this rhythm, and I am going to honor the design even when the culture and the fear and the internal voice of productivity are telling me that the stopping is a mistake." I restore in the rest. That is what I want you to understand most deeply from this message. Not that rest is permissible or defensible or reasonable accommodation to human limitation, that it is where I do some of my most significant work in you, the restoration of what has been depleted, the healing of what the sustained effort has pressed and strained, the speaking that I've been trying to do into the interior that has been too full of the noise of the doing to hear what I have been saying, the revealing of what the busyness has been covering, the building of what can only be built in the quiet. All of that happens in the rest. And when you refuse the rest, you are not only depleting yourself, you are refusing the restoration I was prepared to give you in it. If this message is finding you exhausted today, if something in you recognized itself in these words before I finish speaking them, type, "I receive your rest, Lord," in the comments. Let that be your declaration that you are choosing to receive what I am giving, that you are opening your hands to the gift of genuine rest, that you are willing to stop long enough to be restored. And if this message has guided you, strengthened you, and helped you see your path clearly, then like, subscribe, and share this message, and support this ministry through the link given below so others can receive this message at the right time. I want to name the specific lies that have been spoken over rest, because they are numerous, and they are powerful, and they have been operating in you with an authority they were never entitled to, and the naming of them is the beginning of their displacement. The lies about rest are not abstract or general. They are specific, and they have been delivered through specific voices and specific contexts and specific experiences, and they have accumulated in the interior to produce a person who does not know how to stop without guilt, who cannot be still without the anxiety of what is not being done filling the stillness, who has lost the capacity for genuine rest, even when the circumstances would permit it, because the interior has been so thoroughly trained against it. The first lie is that rest must be earned, that you are entitled to stop only after the work is done, only after the sufficient effort has been made, only after you have produced enough to justify the stopping. This lie is particularly cruel, because the work is never fully done. There is always more to do. Always another responsibility waiting, always another demand on the other side of the completed one, and so the threshold of earned rest is perpetually just out of reach. The person who believes this lie is perpetually tired and perpetually guilty about the tiredness, because the rest they need has not been earned, and the tiredness they feel is not yet sufficiently warranted by having done enough. I want to dismantle this lie at its foundation. Rest does not have to be earned. It was given. It is part of the design. It is available not because you have produced sufficient output to justify it, but because you are a human being made in my image, and therefore subject to the same rhythm of rest and work that I built into the structure of creation from the very beginning. You do not earn the right to breathe. You breathe because you were made to. The same is true of rest. The second lie is that rest is selfish, that the time given to genuine stopping and genuine receiving is time taken from the people who need you, the responsibilities that require you, the purposes that cannot advance without your sustained engagement. This lie is especially effective in people who love deeply and carry genuine responsibilities, because it weaponizes the love and the faithfulness and turns them against the very rest that would make the love more sustainable and the faithfulness more effective. I want to address this lie with a specific and practical truth. The person who does not rest becomes less and less capable of giving what they are refusing to rest in order to give. The sustained refusal of rest does not produce more capacity for the people and purposes you love. It produces the depletion that makes you less present, less patient, less creative, less genuinely available for the things that matter most to you. The rest that feels selfish is often the most genuinely loving thing available, because it restores the capacity that the loving requires. The third lie is that rest is a sign of weakness, that the strong person keeps going, that the person of sufficient faith and sufficient commitment does not need to stop, that the needing of rest is evidence of inadequate spiritual or physical fortitude. This lie has done enormous damage to enormous numbers of my children, because it produces people who push past the body's honest signals, who override the spirit's genuine need, who perform a strength they do not have, because admitting the need for rest feels like admitting a deficiency, and the performing of strength that is not there produces a particular kind of collapse that could have been prevented by the rest that was refused. I want to say plainly, the need for rest is not weakness. It is honesty. It is the accurate acknowledgement of what you actually are, which is a human being with genuine limits, and the honoring of those limits is not the failure of faith, but the expression of it. The faith that rests is the faith that trusts me to sustain what my effort temporarily stops sustaining. That is not weakness. That is one of the most significant acts of trust available to you. The fourth lie is that rest is unspiritual, that the truly devoted person is always engaged, always active, always pressing forward in the service of what God has called them to, and that stopping is a form of spiritual laziness dressed in the language of self-care. This lie has been spoken in religious contexts with particular effectiveness because it sounds like dedication and it masquerades as faithfulness. But it is a distortion of faithfulness that produces burnout and bitterness, and the specific kind of spiritual exhaustion that comes from giving without receiving, from pouring out without being filled, from serving without stopping to be served by the one whose service is the only truly sustaining thing. I rested. My son withdrew. The psalmists lamented and were still. The prophets slept under trees. The pattern of my people has always included the stopping, and the removing of the stopping in the name of spiritual dedication is not more faithful. It is less human, and ultimately less useful to the purposes it is trying to advance. The fifth lie is that what you rest from will fall apart without your continuous effort to sustain it. This is the lie of indispensability, the belief that the thing, the relationship, the ministry, the family, the project cannot survive your stopping, and therefore the stopping, however much it is needed, is not available to you. And I want to address this lie with the same question. What is genuinely yours to sustain, and what is mine? The things that are genuinely mine to sustain will be sustained, whether you rest or not. And the things that would genuinely fall apart without your continuous effort may be things that are not as solid as they need to be, things that need to develop the capacity to stand on their own rather than being perpetually held up by your exhausted hands. Type, I will be still and know that you are God in the comments. Let that be your declaration against the lies that have made stillness feel wrong and rest feel dangerous. Your choosing of what I have said over what the culture and the fear and the inner voice of productivity have been saying about the stopping that your body and spirit have been needing. I want to speak honestly about what the chronic refusal of rest has been costing you, because the cost is real, and it is significant, and it has been accumulating for longer than you may have fully recognized, and seeing it clearly is part of what makes the receiving of rest feel not only permissible, but genuinely necessary. The refusal of rest is not a neutral choice. It is not simply a different style of living that some people prefer, and others do not. It is a sustained and ongoing cost, paid in specific currencies across every dimension of your life, and the currencies being spent are ones you cannot afford to keep depleting indefinitely. The first cost is physical. Your body has been telling you this in its own language for a long time, and the language of the body is very honest even when the mind is very good at overriding it. The fatigue that does not lift after a night of sleep, the lowered immune response that makes you more susceptible to illness than you would otherwise be, the chronic tension that lives in the body as the accumulated physical expression of the sustained effort, the headaches and the digestive disruption, and the various physical symptoms that have no single clear cause, but that are the body's honest report on the interior conditions it is operating in. The body was not designed for the sustained intensity of continuous effort without genuine recovery. The recovery is not optional for the body. It is built into the biology, and the body that is denied its recovery will eventually claim it by force in forms that are far less graceful than the deliberate choosing of rest would have been. The second cost is cognitive. The mind that does not rest does not perform at its best. Not simply in the acute sense of being tired and therefore slower and less sharp, though that too, but in the more pervasive sense of having reduced access to the full range of its capacity. Creativity requires a quality of interior spaciousness that chronic exhaustion closes down. The ability to see situations from multiple perspectives, to hold complexity without collapsing it into the nearest available simple answer, requires a kind of cognitive flexibility that sustained fatigue diminishes. The capacity for genuine problem solving, for the kind of thinking that reaches beyond the obvious toward the genuinely useful, requires a brain that has been given the recovery that allows it to consolidate what it has taken in, and to make the non-obvious connections that innovation and wisdom require. The chronic refusal of rest is producing a version of your thinking that is less than what you are capable of, and you are making significant decisions and engaging in important work from that diminished version rather than from the full capacity that genuine rest would restore. The third cost is relational. The person who has not rested shows up differently in relationship than the person who has. The patience that sustained exhaustion depletes. The genuine curiosity about the other person, that chronic tiredness, replaces with functional engagement that accomplishes the relational tasks without genuinely inhabiting the relational connection. The emotional availability that rest makes possible and that its absence diminishes. The capacity to be truly present with another person, to be fully there rather than partially elsewhere, is significantly affected by the state of the interior. And an interior that has been running without genuine recovery is an interior that has less available for the genuine presence that the people you love most deserve and are not always receiving. The relationships that matter most to you are being shaped, in part, by the rest you have not been giving yourself, and the shaping is not in the direction of the depth and the genuine connection that those relationships were meant to have. The fourth cost is spiritual. The spiritual life is not immune to the effects of chronic exhaustion, and the person who has been running without genuine rest tends to find that the spiritual dimensions of their life become thinner and more functional and less genuinely alive than they were in seasons of greater interior spaciousness. Prayer becomes a task to be completed rather than a genuine encounter. Scripture becomes content to be absorbed rather than a living word to be received. Worship becomes a performance to be offered rather than a genuine turning of the full self toward me. The genuine quality of connection with me that was available in the quieter and more rested seasons of life becomes less accessible, not because I have moved, but because the interior noise and the interior depletion that the chronic overextension produces makes the quiet in which my presence is most perceptible increasingly difficult to access. And this thinning of the spiritual life produces a person who is giving from a genuinely diminishing spiritual reserve, whose well is running lower than they know, and whose continued giving without receiving is producing a spiritual debt that can only be addressed by the genuine stopping and the genuine receiving that rest makes possible. The fifth cost is the cost to who you are becoming. Rest is not only restorative, it is formative. The person you are becoming is shaped by the seasons of genuine stopping as much as by the seasons of sustained effort, because it is in the rest that the integration happens, that what you have been through is processed and made sense of and absorbed into the deeper self, that the wisdom that the experiences were designed to produce actually gets produced rather than being bypassed in the rush to the next thing. The person who never rests is always in motion and never integrating, always producing and never processing, always going and never arriving at the understanding of where the going has been taking them. And the self that is formed by that kind of life is thinner and less rooted and less genuinely wise than the self that is formed by the rhythm of effort and genuine rest that I designed the human life to move within. Type, "Lord, restore my soul in your rest," in the comments today. Let that be your honest acknowledgement of what has been depleted and your genuine opening to the restoration that I am prepared to bring. You're choosing to receive what I have been trying to give in the rest that you have been too busy or too guilty to take. I want to describe what genuine rest actually looks like, because rest is one of those words that is used frequently and understood imprecisely. And the imprecision has led many people to believe they are resting when they are actually doing something quite different, and then to conclude that rest does not produce the restoration they were told it would produce, when the truth is that what they were doing was not the rest that restores. Let me help you distinguish genuine rest from its counterfeits, because the counterfeit versions are common, and they are seductive, and they tend to produce not restoration but a slightly different kind of depletion, and the person who has been reaching for them in place of genuine rest is often more tired than they realize, because they have been applying the wrong remedy to a genuine need. The first counterfeit is escapism, scrolling through a phone for hours, consuming entertainment without engagement, filling the available time with input that requires nothing of the interior and gives nothing back to it. This feels like rest, because it is not the specific work that was depleting you, because the body is still and the explicit demands have temporarily stopped. But it is not genuinely restoring, because it is not genuinely quiet. The interior is still being filled, still processing, still receiving input, even if the input is different from the work input. The screen that is consuming the evening is not restoring what the day took. It is simply replacing one form of input with another, and the body and the spirit that needed genuine quiet are still not receiving it. This is not a condemnation of the occasional enjoyment of entertainment. It is the recognition that entertainment and rest are different things, and that the person who has been using the first as a substitute for the second has been accumulating a deficit that the counterfeit cannot address. The second counterfeit is the incomplete stop. The body sits, but the mind keeps working. The physical activity ceases, but the mental management of everything that needs to be managed continues. The person is technically not doing the work, but is planning the work, reviewing the work, anticipating the next challenge the work will present, rehearsing the conversations they need to have, strategizing about the problems they need to solve. This is the rest of the person who has stopped the hands but not the interior, and it produces not restoration, but a specific kind of exhaustion that is harder to identify because the body was technically still. The interior needs the stopping as much as the body does, and the genuine rest that restores is the stopping of both, the permission given to the mind to not manage for a season, to let what is unresolved remain unresolved for the duration of the rest, without the continued effort to resolve it. The third counterfeit is what I will call productive rest, the rest that is only permissible if it is producing something, the exercise that justifies the stopping because it is improving the body, the reading that is acceptable because it is expanding the knowledge, the silence that is practiced because it is a spiritual discipline rather than a genuine releasing. These things are not wrong in themselves, and they may be genuinely valuable, but they are not the same as genuine rest because they are still organized around production, around the justifying of the stopping by what the stopping is generating. Genuine rest does not need to produce anything in order to be justified. Its justification is that you are a human being made in my image, and I both modeled and commanded the stopping. And the stopping itself, independent of what it generates, is the obedience and the trust and the receiving of the gift. What genuine rest actually looks like is different for different people, and I am not prescribing a single form. But genuine rest has some consistent qualities across its various forms. It is genuinely quiet in the interior, meaning the mind has released its management of the unresolved for the duration. It is receiving rather than producing, meaning the posture is open and receptive, rather than generating output. It is present in the actual moment rather than in the past or the future, meaning the attention is on what is actually here, rather than on what was or what will be. It is trusting in my sustaining of what temporarily stops being sustained by your effort. And it tends to produce, over time, a specific quality of interior that can be recognized, a sense of being fuller than before, of having received something rather than only having spent something, of being more genuinely yourself rather than less, of having been with me in a way that the motion of the day does not permit. Genuine rest is also specifically different from the rest that is only the absence of the most depleting things. It is not just not working, it is actively receiving. It is the deliberate choosing of what replenishes, what genuinely gives back to the interior, what the living of life has been taking, what creates the conditions in which I can do the restoring work that the motion prevents. For some people, this is time in nature, where the specific quality of the created world speaks something to the spirit that no human-made environment can quite replicate. For some people, it is genuine and unhurried prayer, not the functional prayer of bringing requests, but the resting prayer of simply being in my presence without an agenda. For some people, it is the specific creative engagement that restores rather than depletes, the making of something for the love of the making rather than for the requirement of the producing. For some people, it is simply sleep, genuinely prioritized and genuinely protected, the body doing what I designed it to do in the night hours, when the restoration that only sleep provides is actually allowed to happen. Type, I honor the rest you built into creation in the comments today. Let that be your declaration that you are choosing to take seriously what I took seriously enough to model and to command, that you are willing to receive the gift of genuine rest rather than the counterfeit versions that have been filling its place without providing its restoration. I want to show you what rest looks like in a life fully given to purpose, because one of the most persistent lies about rest is that it belongs to people who have less important things to do, that the person with a significant calling and significant responsibilities cannot afford the stopping that rest requires. And I want to address that lie through the most significant life ever lived, the life of my son, who had more purpose and more responsibility and more genuine urgency in his work than anyone who has ever lived, and who rested with a consistency and a deliberateness that his disciples noticed and that the gospel writers thought worth recording. Jesus withdrew. This is one of the most repeated descriptions of his practice in the accounts of his life. After the feeding of the thousands, he withdrew to a mountain alone. After the healing of the crowds, he withdrew to pray. Before the significant decisions, he withdrew and spent the night in prayer. After the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew to a deserted place. The withdrawing was not occasional or exceptional. It was the consistent and deliberate practice of a person who understood that the sustaining of what he was doing required the ongoing receiving of what only the withdrawing could provide. He did not withdraw because the work was finished or because the people no longer needed him. He withdrew in the middle of the need, in the middle of the demand, often when the crowds were pressing most intensely and the requests were most numerous, because he knew that the sustainable giving required the regular stopping. And what did he withdraw to? Not to nothing, not to the absence of everything. He withdrew to me, to prayer, which was not the functional presenting of requests, but the genuine resting in the relationship with the Father that sustained everything else. The withdrawing was the returning to the source, the specific and deliberate choosing of the relationship over the work, the trust that the work would not collapse in the hours he gave to the relationship that was the only true foundation of the work. He withdrew because he understood something that the lie of indispensability does not want you to understand, that the quality of what you give in the active seasons is directly connected to what you receive in the restful ones, and that the person who never withdraws to receive is the person who is giving from a diminishing reserve rather than from an overflow. I also want you to notice how Jesus responded to the exhaustion of others. When his disciples returned from their first significant mission, tired and full of everything that had happened, his instruction to them was not, "Good work, now here is the next task." His instruction was, "Come away to a desolate place and rest for a while." He recognized the need in them, and he responded to it not with the next demand, but with the invitation to the stopping. He was not embarrassed by their need for rest. He did not treat it as a weakness to be overcome or a spiritual deficiency to be addressed through more prayer. He treated it as what it actually was, the honest response of human beings who had genuinely given what they had and who needed what only genuine rest could provide before they could give again with the quality that genuine giving requires. And then there is the moment in the boat, in the storm, Jesus asleep while his disciples were afraid. And what I want you to see in that moment is not primarily the authority over the storm, though that is real and significant. I want you to see the sleep, the genuine, deep, untroubled sleep of a person who was at rest in the middle of difficulty, whose interior was so genuinely rested that even the storm could not penetrate it. That quality of rest, the rest that holds through the storm rather than being disrupted by it, is the rest that I am moving you toward. Not the rest that is only available when everything is calm and resolved and uncomplicated. The rest that is available in my presence, regardless of what is happening around it. The rest that is not dependent on the external environment being peaceful, because the internal environment is resting in something more solid than the external environment can threaten. Jesus also received. He allowed the woman to pour the expensive ointment over him when the disciples objected to the waste. He sat and ate with people when the schedule of his mission was pressing. He let the children come to him when the disciples tried to send them away. He received hospitality, friendship, the caring of others, the specific gift of people who loved him, attending to his needs. He was not only a giver, he was a receiver. And the receiving was not incidental to his life and his ministry. It was part of the model, part of the demonstration of what it looks like to be a human being in relationship with others and with me, where the giving and the receiving are both present, both valued, both necessary for the sustainable living of the life that love and purpose require. Type, "In his presence I find my rest," in the comments. Let that be your declaration that the rest you are choosing is not the absence of purpose, but the choosing of the source of purpose. That the withdrawing you are beginning to practice is the following of the pattern demonstrated by the one whose life was the most purposeful ever lived. And if this message has guided you, strengthened you, and helped you see your path clearly, then like, subscribe, and share this message, and support this ministry through the link given below so others can receive this message at the right time. I want to speak about the Sabbath now, not as a legalistic obligation or a religious regulation to be debated, but as a window into my heart and my design and my understanding of what human beings need to flourish. The Sabbath was not an afterthought. It was not a concession to human weakness added to the creation narrative because I realized my creatures were fragile. It was woven into the very structure of creation from the beginning, established in the rhythm of the first week as a permanent feature of the design, a built-in declaration that the stopping is as sacred as the working, that the rest is as necessary as the effort, that the receiving is as important as the producing. I rested on the seventh day, not because the work had exhausted me, but because I was establishing a pattern, demonstrating a rhythm, making a declaration about the nature of the life I was giving to my image bearers. You are not machines. You are not designed for perpetual motion. You are designed for the rhythm of effort and rest, of giving and receiving, of doing and being, and the honoring of that rhythm is not the accommodation of weakness. It is the living into the design. When I gave my people the commandment to observe the Sabbath, it was the only one of the 10 that came with an explanation built into the command itself. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The explanation, in 6 days I made heaven and earth, but on the seventh day I rested and was refreshed. The word refreshed is significant. It is the Hebrew word that means to breathe, to catch the breath, to experience the specific vitality that comes from the genuine stopping after the genuine work. I was refreshed, not because I needed refreshing in the way that a depleted human being needs it, but because I was demonstrating in myself what the rhythm produces, what the stopping after the working feels like, what the built-in restoration of the Sabbath rest was designed to give to every person who honored it. The Sabbath was not primarily a rule. It was a gift, a weekly provision of restoration built into the structure of time itself, a recurring invitation to the specific and genuine refreshing that sustained effort requires. And I want to say something about what the Sabbath was protecting my people from, because it was given in a specific historical context that is not as different from your context as it might first appear. It was given to people who had been slaves, people who had spent years being defined entirely by their productivity, who had been valued only for their output, who had been given no rest because the system that owned them had no interest in their flourishing, only in their production. The Sabbath command was one of the first and most radical things I did with the people I had just freed, and it was a declaration: you are no longer slaves. You are not defined by your output. You are not owned by the system of production. You have worth that is not measured by what you produce in any given period. And the keeping of the Sabbath, the weekly refusal to work, was the practical enactment of that freedom. The lived declaration that this person is not a slave, that their worth exists independent of their productivity, that they have the right to stop because they are human beings made in my image and not tools to be used until they are broken. I want you to hear that in the context of your own life, because the culture you are living in is not slavery in the historical sense, but it is a system that measures worth by productivity, that defines value by output, that has no structural provision for genuine rest, and that often treats the person who stops as someone who is falling behind or failing to compete, or insufficiently committed to what they claim to care about. And the honoring of genuine rest in that context is a form of the same declaration the Sabbath was making to my freed people: I am not a slave to this system. One third Matt. My worth is not determined by my productivity. I have the right to stop, not because I have produced enough to justify the stopping, but because I am a human being made in my image, and the stopping is part of what I was designed for. The choosing of genuine rest in a culture that devalues it is an act of freedom. It is the refusal to be owned by the system of endless production. It is the living into the design that I established from the beginning of creation. The Sabbath principle does not require a specific day or a specific religious form in order to be honored in your life. What it requires is the consistent and intentional building of genuine rest into the rhythm of your life, the regular and protected provision of the stopping that the design requires. The specific form it takes will be shaped by the specific circumstances of your specific life, but the principle, the honoring of the rhythm, the deliberate and recurring choosing of genuine rest as a non-negotiable dimension of the life you are living, is not optional for the flourishing of the human being. It is the design. And living against the design is what you have been doing, and it is what the cost we described in an earlier part of this message has been accumulating from. The Sabbath is not a rule to be kept. It is a gift to be received, and it has been waiting for you to open your hands. Type, "He restores my soul," in the comments today. Let that be your declaration of what the genuine rest I am describing actually produces. Not the absence of productivity, but the presence of restoration. The specific and genuine replenishment that I have been preparing to give you in the stopping that you have been too driven or too guilty to take. I want to describe what I actually do in the rest, because rest is often understood only as the absence of work, when it is actually the presence of my most significant interior work. The rest is not an empty space that simply gives the depleted system time to recover on its own. It is the specific context in which I can do things in you that the motion and the noise and the sustained effort of your active seasons prevent me from doing. And I want to name some of those things specifically so that you understand what is at stake when you refuse the rest. What you are refusing, not only for yourself, but from me. What I have been prepared to do in the quiet that the busyness has been preventing. The first thing I do in the rest is restore what has been depleted. Not simply the physical energy that the body replenishes through sleep, though that too, but the deeper reserves, the spiritual vitality and the emotional resilience, and the interior spaciousness that the sustained giving of yourself has been drawing down. The person who gives genuinely and consistently from a place of genuine love and genuine commitment is drawing on reserves that need to be replenished. And the replenishment does not happen automatically or through the mere absence of the work. It happens through the specific receiving that genuine rest makes possible, through the person opening themselves to what I am pouring back in during the stopping. Think of it as a vessel that has been pouring out. The pouring out is good, and it is necessary, and it is what love looks like in action. But the vessel that never stops to be filled again will eventually pour out nothing, will become the vessel that is trying to give what it no longer has, and the giving will become increasingly hollow and increasingly costly and increasingly unlike the genuine overflowing that it was at the beginning. The rest is the filling. I am the one doing the filling, and the filling requires the stopping. The second thing I do in the rest is heal what has been pressed. The sustained effort of the active seasons does not only deplete, it presses. It creates strains and tensions and micro-injuries in the interior that accumulate without being addressed when the motion continues without the stopping. The emotional bruising that comes from the sustained carrying of difficult things. The spiritual weariness that comes from the ongoing effort to maintain faithfulness through resistance. The interior tensions that the sustained pressure of significant responsibility produces. These things need tending, and they cannot receive the tending they need while the motion continues. They can only be addressed in the stopping, in the quiet that allows them to surface from where they have been suppressed by the activity, to be felt and acknowledged and brought to me for the specific attention they require. The rest is the space in which the healing that the pressed places need can actually happen, and the refusing of the rest is the refusing of the healing. The third thing I do in the rest is speak into what the noise has covered. I speak in a still small voice. Not always, but often. And the still small voice requires a quality of interior quiet to be received clearly. The person who is always in motion, always occupied, always producing, is the person who is always louder than the frequency on which I most consistently speak. And there are things I've been trying to say into the specific situations and the specific questions and the specific crossroads of your life that have not been received because there has not been the quiet in which my voice could be heard above the noise of everything else. The rest is where the receiving happens. The specific clarity about a decision that has been unclear. The specific direction about a relationship that has been complicated. The specific encouragement about a situation that has felt too hard. The specific word of my love that has not been able to penetrate the interior because the interior has been too full of everything else to make room for what I was bringing. These things are waiting in the rest. They have been prepared. They are available. They are in the quiet that you have not been taking. The fourth thing I do in the rest is integrate what the activity has produced. The experiences and the learning and the growth of the active seasons do not automatically become wisdom. They become wisdom through the processing, through the reflection and the integration that transforms the raw material of experience into the refined substance of genuine understanding. And this processing requires the stopping, requires the quiet, in which the interior can do the work of making sense of what it has been through, of connecting what has happened to what I have said, of seeing the pattern and the meaning and the growth that the activity was producing without the active seasons, always providing the context to see it. The rest is where you begin to understand your own story, where what has been happening to you becomes something you can hold and name and find me in, where the specific and personal theology of your life, the specific and lived understanding of who I am and how I work, that only comes from having been through what you have been through, actually gets formed. The fifth thing I do in the rest is prepare you for what is coming. The seasons of genuine rest are not only restorative in relation to what has passed, they are preparatory in relation to what is ahead. I use the quiet seasons to form what the active seasons will require, to build in the interior the specific capacities and the specific character and the specific depth that the next season of significant engagement will draw on. The person who never rests arrives at the next significant season less prepared than they would have been, because the preparation that genuine rest enables did not happen. The rest is not only the recovery from what was, it is the formation of what will be, and refusing it is refusing not only the restoration you need now, but the preparation that the future you requires. Type, I trust you to sustain what I rest from in the comments. Let that be your declaration of the specific trust that rest requires. The choosing to believe that what you temporarily stop sustaining through your effort is genuinely sustained by mine. That the stopping is not the abandoning, but the trusting. I want to speak about the guilt now, because the guilt is perhaps the most immediate and most persistent barrier between you and the genuine rest I am describing. You may have read everything in this message so far and agreed with it theologically and felt the resonance of it in the interior, and simultaneously known that even if you tried to rest today, the guilt would be there within minutes of the stopping, making the rest feel stolen rather than given, making the stillness feel like a failure rather than a gift, making the not doing feel like a wrong rather than an obedience. The guilt about rest is real, and it is powerful, and it has been one of the primary mechanisms by which the genuine rest has been kept out of your life, even in the seasons when the circumstances would have permitted it. I want to trace where the guilt comes from, because guilt that is understood is guilt that can be addressed, and guilt that remains unnamed tends to function as though it were simply the voice of truth, when it is actually something quite different. The guilt about rest comes from several sources, and they are worth identifying specifically. Some of it comes from the messages you absorbed early about what makes a person valuable. If the environment you grew up in communicated, directly or indirectly, that love was conditional on performance, that approval was connected to productivity, that your worth in the family or the community was measured by what you contributed, then stopping feels like withdrawing the contribution that earns the love and the approval, and the stopping feels dangerous in a way that is out of proportion to the actual risk of the resting. The guilt is not about the rest itself. It is about the deeply embedded belief that resting means losing what the performance was earning. And the losing of what the performance was earning feels like losing the love and the belonging that the performance was buying. I want to speak into that specific wound. My love for you is not contingent on your performance. It is not increased by your productivity or decreased by your resting. I love you in the stopping as much as in the going, as fully in the receiving as in the giving, and the guilt that tells you otherwise is not my voice. It is the voice of the early wound, and it has been given authority it does not deserve. Some of the guilt comes from the comparison with others who are still going when you are stopping. The awareness, real or imagined, of other people who are further ahead and working harder and producing more and not stopping. And the conclusion that you're stopping in comparison to their going is evidence of inadequacy or insufficiency. This comparison is almost always inaccurate, because you are seeing their external motion without seeing their internal depletion, without knowing what the sustained going without genuine rest is costing them, without access to the full picture of what their life actually contains. But even when the comparison is accurate, even when the other person genuinely is producing more than you are in the season when you are resting, the comparison is irrelevant to whether your rest is right and necessary. I have called you to your life and your rhythm, not to the life and rhythm of the person you are comparing yourself to. What is right for them is not necessarily right for you. And what I am saying to you about rest is specifically for you, in your specific situation, with my full knowledge of what you have been carrying and what you genuinely need. Some of the guilt comes from the specific things that are not getting done during the rest. The undone tasks, the unaddressed messages, the unmade decisions, the uncompleted projects. These things are real, and they will be there when the rest is over, and the awareness of them during the rest makes the rest feel like avoidance rather than genuine stopping. I want to address this specifically. The things that are not getting done during your rest are not evidence that the rest is wrong. They are evidence that there is always more to do than can be done in the available time, and that a life organized entirely around the doing of everything that needs to be done will never include the rest that the doer needs. Something always remains undone. The rest is not the denial of the undone. It is the trust that the undone can wait, that I can hold what is waiting while you receive what I am giving in the stopping, that the world will not collapse in the hours of genuine rest that the sustainable living of your life requires. And some of the guilt is simply the discomfort of doing something that has not been practiced. The interior that has been organized around motion for a long time is not immediately comfortable with stillness, and the discomfort of the unfamiliarity presents itself as guilt, because guilt is one of the ways the interior resists what feels wrong, even when it is not wrong. The first times of genuine rest may feel genuinely uncomfortable, may produce the anxiety of the stopped person who is not sure what to do with the stopping, may surface the guilt and the restlessness and the reaching for the next productive thing that is the habituated response to stillness. This discomfort is not evidence that the rest is wrong or that you are doing it incorrectly. It is the discomfort of the beginning of a new practice, of the interior beginning to learn a different relationship with stillness than the one it has always had. It passes. The more you practice genuine rest, the more natural it becomes, and the guilt that greeted the early attempts gradually loses its authority as the interior learns from experience that the rest is genuinely safe and genuinely good. Type, "I come to you weary and you give me rest," in the comments today. Let that be your declaration of the specific posture that receiving rest requires, the honest acknowledgement of the weariness and the genuine turning toward the one who gives the rest that the weariness needs, the releasing of the guilt that has been intercepting the gift before it could be received. I want to speak about identity now, because underneath the guilt and the drivenness and the chronic refusal of rest, there is almost always an identity question, a deep and often unexamined belief about who you are and what makes you valuable and what your worth is based on. And the reason rest is so threatening to so many people is not primarily that they have too much to do, though that is real. It is that rest challenges the identity, challenges the self-understanding that has been organized around productivity and usefulness and the contribution that earns the place. And the challenging of that identity feels like the threatening of the self. And the threatening of the self produces resistance that is much stronger than the simple unwillingness to stop working. The identity that has been built around productivity is one of the most common and most quietly destructive identity formations available to human beings because it is so thoroughly affirmed by the culture that it does not feel like a formation at all. It feels like simply knowing who you are. You are someone who works hard. You are someone who is reliable and responsible and can be counted on. You are someone who shows up and delivers and does not let people down. You are someone whose love is demonstrated through what you do for the people you love. You are someone whose worth is visible in the results of your effort. These things feel like identity, like the simple description of who you are, and they may contain genuine truth about real qualities you possess. But when they become the foundation of your worth rather than the expression of your character, when the stopping threatens them rather than the continuing expressing them, they have crossed from description to definition, and the definition that is built on productivity is one that rest genuinely threatens because rest is the interruption of the thing the definition depends on. I want to offer you a different foundation. Not a different description of what you do, but a different source of who you are, a foundation that rest does not threaten because it is not dependent on the doing. You are my child. That is the first and the last and the most permanent thing about you, and it is not produced by your effort or maintained by your productivity, or threatened by your stopping. You were, my child, before you did anything to earn it. And you will be, my child, after everything you have ever done is finished. And on every day in between, the identity remains absolutely intact, regardless of what you produce that day, or fail to produce. The worth that comes from being my child is not quantified or qualified by the output. It is simply there, given at the moment of your formation, maintained by my love and not by your performance, available to you and the rest as fully as in the work. This matters enormously for how you receive genuine rest, because the person who is resting from a foundation of productivity-based identity cannot fully receive the rest because the rest is threatening the foundation. The stopping feels like the losing of what makes them valuable, and the anxiety of the losing prevents the full receiving of the gift. But the person who is resting from a foundation of being, my child, can receive the rest, because the rest does not threaten the foundation. The stopping does not reduce the love. The not producing does not diminish the worth. The stillness does not subtract from the identity. And so the rest can actually be what it is designed to be, the genuine receiving of what I am giving, rather than the anxious enduring of the gap in the performance that usually provides the sense of worth. I also want to speak about what the rest reveals about identity, because the stopping is one of the most honest and sometimes most uncomfortable mirrors available to the person whose identity has been primarily organized around the doing. When the doing stops, what remains? When the productivity that has been defining the self is temporarily removed, who is there? This is a question that the driven person tends to avoid, tends to fill with the next task before the question can settle into the interior and demand an answer, because the possible answers are frightening. What if what remains is not enough? What if the self without the output is smaller than the self that was producing was? What if the stopping reveals that the sense of significance that the doing was providing was not something that belongs to the self at all, but only to the activity? I want to be with you in that question rather than helping you avoid it, because the answer I give is not the frightening one. The fear is predicting. What remains when the doing stops is you, the actual you, the you I made and know and love, the you that exists independently of everything you have ever produced or accomplished. That you is not smaller than the productive you. It is in many ways larger, richer, more genuinely interesting, and more genuinely lovable than the productive version of yourself that has been the primary thing on display. The rest reveals the person, and the person is worth knowing. Let the rest show you who you are when what you do is temporarily put down. Let me show you what I see when I look at you in the stopping. What I see is not less, it is more. It is the real you. And the real you is who I have been wanting to spend time with all along. Type, I am a vessel being filled by God in the comments today. Let that be your declaration of the identity that makes rest possible, the identity of the one who receives rather than only gives, who is filled before they pour out, whose worth is in who they are to me rather than what they produce for the world. I want to address the practical objection that is most commonly raised against the kind of rest I have been describing, because it is a real objection that deserves a real answer rather than a dismissal. The objection is this: I cannot afford to rest. Not in the spiritual or theological sense, but in the practical sense. The work that needs to be done is genuinely more than the time available to do it. The responsibilities are genuinely significant and genuinely pressing. The people who depend on me are genuinely depending, and giving significant amounts of time to genuine rest will genuinely result in less getting done. And less getting done will genuinely have real consequences for real people and real situations. This is not a theoretical objection. It is the honest assessment of a person who is genuinely overextended and who cannot see how the adding of rest to the equation produces anything other than more of the important things going undone. I want to respond to this objection with both honesty and with what I know to be true from watching the full arc of how human beings actually function. The honest part first Yes, some things will not get done during the time you give to rest. The rest does not create additional hours. It does not expand the available time. In the short term and in the narrow measurement, the rest does cost something in terms of immediate output. I am not going to tell you otherwise, because it would not be true, and you would feel the dishonesty of it immediately. The rest has a real cost in terms of the immediate doing. But here is what the narrow measurement misses. What becomes visible only when you look at the longer arc rather than the immediate hour. The person who genuinely rests consistently produces more of what actually matters over the full span of their life than the person who never rests, even though in any given short period, the resting person appears to be doing less. This is not a motivational slogan. It is what I have observed across the full range of my children's lives. The person who treats rest as non-negotiable and who protects it as such tends to bring a quality and a clarity and a creativity to their active seasons that the chronically overextended person cannot sustain. The decisions they make from a rested interior are better decisions than the decisions made from exhaustion. The creativity available to the rested mind is greater than the creativity available to the depleted one. The patience and the presence they bring to the people they love is more genuinely nourishing than the functional and depleted engagement of the person who gave all the rest time to more work. There is also a quality question that the quantity calculation tends to overlook. The output of genuine rest is not the same as the output of exhaustion, even when the hours are identical. The work done from a full interior, from a genuinely rested and restored place, tends to be work that is better, more accurate, more genuinely useful, more aligned with what actually needs to happen, and less distorted by the particular distortions that exhaustion produces in the thinking. The 10 hours of genuinely rested engagement tends to produce more of what actually matters than 14 hours of depleted straining, even though 14 is more than 10. The quality of the engagement is not separable from the quantity of the output, and the quality diminishes in direct proportion to the depth of the depletion. I also want to speak about the long-term sustainability question, because the person who continues without genuine rest is not actually maintaining the level of output they are protecting the rest time in order to maintain. They are depleting. The output is declining, often imperceptibly at first, as the reserves that were drawn on early in the sustained overextension begin to run low. The quality is declining, the creativity is declining, the patience and the presence are declining, and eventually the body or the spirit or both will make a claim for the rest that was refused, in a form that is far less graceful and far less useful than the deliberate choosing of rest would have been. The burnout, the illness, the collapse of the relationship that was being sustained on fumes, the spiritual crisis that comes from a person who has been giving from empty for long enough that there is nothing left to give, and the emptiness has become undeniable. These are not dramatic exceptions to the normal pattern. They are the predictable outcome of the sustained refusal of what the design requires. And the receiving of genuine rest now is not the sacrifice of what the overextension was producing. It is the protection of it. Type, "His yoke is easy and his burden is light" in the comments. Let that be your declaration that you are choosing the sustainable rhythm over the unsustainable straining, the life that includes genuine rest over the life that consumes itself in the attempt to produce more than the design was built to sustain. And if this message has guided you, strengthened you, and helped you see your path clearly, then like, subscribe, and share this message, and support this ministry through the link given below so others can receive this message at the right time. I want to speak about the different dimensions of rest, because rest is not a single thing, and the person who has been providing one dimension of it while neglecting others may find themselves partially rested and still significantly depleted, unable to identify why the rest they thought they were taking is not producing the restoration they were hoping for. The human being I made is complex, multi-layered, and each layer has its own rest requirements and its own restoration rhythms. And the full restoration I am describing requires attending to each dimension, rather than assuming that addressing one dimension addresses all of them. The first dimension is body rest, and it is the most obvious and the most commonly, at least partially addressed. The body requires sleep, genuine and sufficient sleep, not the truncated sleep of the person who has too much to do and too little time to do it, and who resolves the gap by taking the sleep hours. The body requires the specific kind of recovery that only sleep provides. The physical repair and the hormonal resetting and the memory consolidation and the immune system strengthening that happens specifically during the sleep hours and cannot be replicated by any other form of rest or any level of wakeful relaxation. Many of my children are significantly sleep deprived in ways they have normalized to the point where they no longer recognize the deprivation as deprivation. The tiredness has become the baseline, the new normal, the way things always feel, and the possibility of feeling genuinely rested seems like a distant memory or a luxury rather than an achievable daily reality. Body rest begins with taking the sleep seriously, with protecting it as the non-negotiable that it is, with releasing the belief that the hours given to sleep are hours stolen from productivity rather than hours invested in the capacity that productivity requires. The second dimension is mind rest, and this is perhaps the most neglected dimension in the lives of my most driven children, because the mind can continue its work even when the body has stopped. The mind rest is the genuine quieting of the mental management, the releasing of the processing and the planning and the problem solving and the reviewing and the anticipating that the active mind is constantly performing. Mind rest does not happen automatically when the body stops. It requires specific and intentional conditions, the deliberate choosing to not engage with the thoughts that want to continue the work during the rest. This is what meditation and contemplative prayer and genuine Sabbath were designed to provide. The specific quieting of the mental activity that the body rest does not automatically include. The person who spends their rest hours reviewing what they did today and planning what they will do tomorrow is not resting the mind. They are resting the body while continuing to work the mind, and the mind that does not rest is the mind that produces the particular kind of exhaustion that sleep does not cure. The third dimension is soul rest, and it is the deepest and the most significant and the most directly connected to what I am doing in the quiet. Soul rest is the genuine releasing of the interior to receive what I am giving, the opening of the spirit to my presence in a way that the active and producing and managing interior cannot sustain. It is the prayer that is not presenting requests, but simply being in my presence. It is the worship that is not a performance, but a genuine turning of the full self toward me in adoration and in receiving. It is the scripture reading that is not the consumption of content, but the allowing of the living word to speak directly into the interior with the specific word that the specific moment requires. Soul rest is what produces the deepest restoration, because it connects the depleted interior directly to the inexhaustible source, and the receiving that happens in that connection is the specific filling that no other form of rest can replicate. The fourth dimension is relational rest, and this one is rarely discussed, but genuinely significant. Every relationship in your life has a relational cost, even the relationships you love most. Being in relationship with people, giving the attention and the care and the navigating of the complexity that genuine relationship requires, draws on reserves that need to be replenished. And for some people, particularly those who are significantly introverted or who carry significant relational responsibilities, the relational rest of time alone, of genuine solitude without obligation or expectation, is an essential part of the restoration that the full giving of themselves in relationship requires. The person who is never alone, who is always available to everyone, who has no protected space of genuine solitude, is the person who is likely giving relationally from a deficit rather than from a genuine abundance. The relational rest is not isolation or the avoiding of people. It is the specific provision of the interior quiet that some people require in order to be genuinely present when the solitude ends. And the fifth dimension is creative rest, the rest that comes from engaging with beauty and delight and the non-productive dimensions of being alive, the things that give back to the interior simply by being experienced rather than by being used for something. The walk in which the only purpose is to be in the created world. The music listened to for the love of the listening. The meal enjoyed slowly rather than consumed efficiently. The conversation that is not productive but is genuinely connecting. These things are not luxuries appended to the real business of the productive life. They are the provision of something the human being needs, that neither the work nor the sleep provides. The specific nourishment of the parts of the interior, that beauty and delight and the sheer experience of being alive were designed to feed. Type, I dwell in the shadow of the Almighty, in the comments. Let that be your declaration of the soul rest. That is the deepest dimension of all the rest I am describing. The choosing to shelter in my presence as the primary and most fundamental form of the restoration your interior has been needing. I want to speak about the rhythms of rest, because rest that is only taken when the depletion has become undeniable is not the rest that sustains the life. The genuine rest I am describing is not crisis rest, not the collapsing into recovery after the exhaustion has reached its limit. It is the built-in, protected, recurring provision of restoration that the design requires, the rhythmic stopping that is woven into the structure of the life before the depletion demands it, rather than only after the collapse has made it unavoidable. And the rhythms operate at multiple levels simultaneously, each addressing a different layer of the need. The daily rhythm of rest is the smallest and most immediate level. Every day contains within it moments that are designed for genuine restoration rather than productive activity, and the honoring of those moments is the most basic level of the rest provision. The morning, before the demands of the day have fully asserted themselves, is a moment of genuine daily rest potential, a brief but real opportunity to receive before the day requires you to give. Not a lengthy devotional that adds to the obligation list, but a genuine moment of interior quiet, of orientation toward me, of receiving the specific provision of my presence before the specific provision of what the day will ask. The evening, when the work of the day is genuinely complete, is another moment of daily rest potential, the genuine stopping before the sleep, the releasing of the day's contents into my hands, rather than carrying them through the night hours in the mental reviewing that prevents genuine recovery. The honoring of these daily moments does not require large amounts of time. It requires the genuine intention to stop and receive, rather than filling every available moment with more activity. The weekly rhythm of rest is the level at which the Sabbath principle operates, the provision of one day in 7 that is genuinely different from the other 6, genuinely set apart for restoration and recreation, and the specific receiving that the weekly work makes necessary. The weekly day of rest is not a day of doing nothing in the strict sense. It is a day of doing differently, of engaging with the things that restore rather than the things that produce, of being with the people you love in the present rather than managing the tasks that require your ongoing attention. The specific form it takes will be shaped by your specific life, but the principle, the consistent and protected provision of one day in 7 that is genuinely set apart for restoration is one of the most significant structural investments you can make in the sustainable living of the life I have for you. The person who protects the weekly rest consistently tends to find that the other 6 days are more productive and more genuinely alive than they were when all 7 were given to the work. The seasonal rhythm of rest operates at the larger level, the provision of longer periods of genuine recovery at the scale of the year. The vacation that is actually restful rather than the performance of recreation that exhausts the person differently than the work exhausted them. The retreat that provides genuine silence and genuine encounter with me rather than the busyness of spiritual activity. The deliberate season of reduced commitment that allows the interior to settle from the sustained intensity of the active season. These longer rests are more difficult to protect in the practical structure of most people's lives, and I am not dismissing the genuine obstacles, but I am saying that the life that never includes these longer seasons of genuine recovery is a life that is running on diminishing returns, that is borrowing from future capacity to maintain the present output, and that will eventually face a reckoning that the periodic longer rest would have prevented. The life season rhythm of rest is the largest scale, the recognition that different seasons of life call for different levels of intensity and different provisions of rest. The season of young children, the season of significant loss or transition, the season of recovery from illness or from the sustained intensity of a significant project or a significant responsibility. These seasons have their own rest requirements that are different from the rest requirements of other seasons, and the honoring of those specific requirements is not weakness or failure. It is the wisdom of a person who knows that the sustainable living of a full life requires the specific provision that each season's specific demands make necessary. The building of these rhythms into the actual structure of your life requires the same kind of intentionality and the same kind of protection that you give to the most important commitments on your calendar. The rest that is not scheduled tends not to happen because the demands will always fill the available space if the rest is not explicitly protected. Put it in the calendar. Protect it from the incursion of the next demand. Treat it as the non-negotiable it is, rather than as the variable that is sacrificed when the schedule is full. The scheduling of rest is not the reduction of rest to a task. It is the taking seriously of what the design requires in the practical language of the life that needs to be organized in order to actually happen. Type "I choose rest" as an act of faith in the comments. Let that be your declaration that the building of rest into your life is not the concession to weakness, but the act of trust that says, "I believe what God has said about what I need. I believe that what I rest from will be sustained, and I am choosing to honor the design rather than to fight it." I want to speak about what genuine rest does to your relationships, because the people you love are one of the primary reasons you give for not resting. And I want to show you that the relationship between rest and the people you love is almost exactly the opposite of what the guilt about not resting has been telling you. The guilt says resting is taking from the people who need you. The truth is, resting is one of the most significant things you can do for the people who need you, because the rested version of you is a fundamentally different and fundamentally more present and genuinely more loving version than the depleted version that the chronic refusal of rest produces. The first thing that changes in your relationships when you genuinely rest is your presence. The depleted person is present in their relationships in a particular way, a way that is partial and managed and slightly behind the glass of their own exhaustion. They are in the conversation, but the full version of them is not available for it. They are listening, but the quality of the listening is reduced by the interior noise of everything they are carrying. They are responding, but the responses are coming from a shallower place than they would come from in a rested state, from the surface of the personality rather than from the depth that genuine presence requires. When you rest, the presence returns. The full and undivided quality of attention that the people you love deserve becomes available again. The genuine curiosity about the person in front of you that exhaustion suppresses. The real engagement with what they are saying and what they are feeling and what they need, that the rested interior is capable of, and the depleted one is not. The second thing that changes is your patience. Patience is one of the first casualties of sustained exhaustion and one of the first beneficiaries of genuine rest. The person who is genuinely depleted has reduced capacity for the minor frustrations and the ordinary irritations and the normal imperfections of the people they live and work with, and the reduced capacity expresses itself in the quickness of the reactive response, the sharpness of the frustrated word, the disproportionate response to the small provocation that the rested person would have moved through with much more grace. The relationships in your life that have been paying the price of your exhaustion, the people who have been on the receiving end of the depleted version of your patience, would be genuinely served by your rest. The most loving thing you can do for the people who experience your irritability is not to try harder to be patient while remaining exhausted. It is to address the exhaustion that is producing the reduced capacity for patience. The third thing that changes is your capacity to receive, The relationships in your life are not only places where you give, they are also places where you receive. Places where the people who love you are offering their love and their care and their presence and their specific expression of who they are to you. And the exhausted person tends to be a poor receiver, tends to be so occupied with the ongoing management of the giving that the receiving does not fully land, tends to deflect or minimize or quickly return what is offered before it can be fully received. The rested person has more interior space available for genuine receiving, more capacity to let what is offered actually land, more ability to be genuinely moved by the love that is directed toward them. And the relationships that have been giving without their giving being fully received tend to flourish when the person who is too depleted to fully receive becomes rested enough to actually be there for what is being offered. The fourth thing that changes is the quality of the love you give. Love given from a genuinely rested interior has a different quality than love given from depletion. Not that the depleted love is not real, because it is, and the love that continues through exhaustion is in some ways the most costly and most faithful love available. But the love that comes from a full interior, from a place of genuine abundance, rather than from the bottom of the reserves, has a warmth and a generosity and a spontaneity that the love from depletion tends to lack. The rested person loves more freely, more creatively, more genuinely from the overflow rather than from the grinding out of what remains. And the people on the receiving end of that love tend to know the difference, even when they cannot name it, even when they have not consciously registered that the quality has changed. Something in them recognizes the difference between being loved by someone who has something to give and being loved by someone who is giving what they do not have. And I want to say something to the parents specifically, because the parent identity is one of the identities most thoroughly organized around giving and most resistant to the rest that the giving requires. The most significant thing you can model to your children is not the sustained overextension that sacrifices your well-being on the altar of their needs. It is the healthy and sustainable and genuinely loving engagement that comes from a person who takes their own needs seriously enough to provide for them. The child who watches their parent rest, who sees the parent take the sleep and the time and the genuine provision of the restoration the parent needs, is learning something more valuable than anything the parent could teach while running on empty. They are learning that their own needs will be worth attending to, that rest is not shameful but necessary, that the sustainable life includes the provision for what the living of it requires. Type, "My strength is renewed in waiting on the Lord," in the comments. Let that be your declaration, that the rest you are choosing is not the withholding of yourself from the people who love you, but the preparation of the version of yourself that is most genuinely available to them, the filling of the vessel that pours out for them, the choosing of the sustainable love over the depleting performance of love. I want to give you a vision of what becomes available as genuine rest is established in the rhythm of your life, because you need something to move toward, a genuine picture of what the rested life actually looks and feels like in the ordinary texture of ordinary days, so that the building of rest into your life feels not like the sacrifice of something, but like the moving toward something genuinely worth arriving at. Let me describe what I see when I look at the version of you who has received what I have been preparing in the rest, the you that is emerging as the rhythms of restoration become more consistently honored. What becomes available is a different quality of waking. The morning that begins not with the resumption of the carrying, but with the genuine sense of something having been received through the night, of the body having actually rested, and the interior having been genuinely quiet, and the day beginning not from the bottom of the reserves, but from a place that has been genuinely replenished. Not every morning will feel this way, even in the established rest rhythm, because the restoration is gradual, and the sleep is not always perfect, and the interior is not always quiet. But the consistent direction of the morning experience changes as the rest becomes more consistently provided, from the experience of someone who is always behind, always already depleted before the day has begun, to the experience of someone who is genuinely starting from a replenished place, and who therefore has more to give and more of themselves to bring to what the day contains. What becomes available is a different quality of thinking. The mind that is genuinely rested thinks differently from the mind that is chronically depleted, and the difference is significant enough that it changes the quality of everything the mind is applied to. The clarity that the rested mind brings to complex situations. The creativity that becomes accessible when the mind has been genuinely quiet, and the non-obvious connections that rest makes possible have had space to form. The wisdom that comes from the integration that genuine rest enables, the deeper processing of what has been experienced that transforms information into understanding, and understanding into the specific judgment that only comes from genuinely reflecting rather than perpetually reacting. The decisions made from the rested mind are better decisions, more genuinely aligned with what is true and what matters, less distorted by the particular distortions that exhaustion introduces into the thinking. What becomes available is a different quality of faith. The faith of the genuinely rested person is quieter and deeper and more genuinely trusting than the faith of the chronically overextended one. Not because the rested person has fewer difficulties or fewer questions or fewer seasons of genuine uncertainty, but because the rest has created the conditions in which a different kind of faith can form, the kind that is rooted in the actual experience of my faithfulness rather than only in the intellectual conviction of it. The person who genuinely rests in me, who brings the interior to genuine quiet in my presence consistently, who receives what I give in those quiet seasons, begins to accumulate an experiential foundation of trust that the person who is always in motion never has the opportunity to build. That foundation sustains through things that the thinner faith of the perpetually busy person cannot sustain, because it is built not only on what was received in the dramatic moments, but on what was received in the consistent, ordinary, unglamorous quiet of the regular rest. What becomes available is a different relationship with your own calling. The person who is chronically overextended tends to lose touch with a specific and particular calling of their life over time, because the sustained engagement with the immediate demands of the moment gradually displaces the larger perspective of what the life was designed to be for. The immediate thing that needs doing today tends to crowd out the longer arc of the question of what the whole of the life is being oriented toward. In the rest, the larger perspective returns. The quiet that the rest provides is the context in which the deeper questions can be heard, in which the specific and personal word I am speaking about, what this person's life is for, and where it is going, and what it is becoming, can actually land in the interior rather than being swept away by the noise of the next demand. The rested person tends to have a clearer and more settled sense of their calling than the overextended person, because the rest has created the space in which the calling can be received and confirmed and oriented toward in a way that the continuous motion does not permit. And what becomes available is a different quality of being. Not the doing, not the producing, not the giving, but the simply being, the specific experience of being alive and present and genuinely here. That is one of the most fundamental and most frequently lost dimensions of the human experience. The person who is always in motion is rarely fully arrived in their own life, rarely fully inhabiting the specific and unrepeatable moments of the life they are living, because the momentum of the motion carries them past the present toward the next thing before the present has been fully received. The rest returns the present. It makes the actual, specific moment accessible in a way that the motion does not permit. And the life that is lived in the present, that is genuinely inhabited rather than only traversed, is a qualitatively different and genuinely richer life than the life that is lived primarily in the motion toward the next thing. Type I step into the rest prepared for me in the comments. Let that be your declaration of the life you are choosing to move toward, the life of the genuinely rested person who has received what I have been preparing in the quiet, who has discovered that the stopping was not the losing of the life, but the finding of it. I want to give you something practical to begin with, because the vision of the rested life I have been describing throughout this message needs to be translated from the inspiring to the actual, from the beautiful picture to the specific choices in the specific days of your specific life. And the translation is where most people get stuck, because the gap between wanting to rest and actually resting is bridged not by inspiration alone, but by the specific and concrete practices that make the rest actually happen in a life that is organized around demands that will always press toward filling every available space if the rest is not explicitly and deliberately built in. Let me give you a framework for beginning. The first practice is the morning pause. Before anything else, before the phone and the messages and the first task of the day, take 3 to 5 minutes of genuine quiet. Not a lengthy devotional that becomes another obligation. 3 to 5 minutes of actual stillness, of interior quiet, of simply being present with me before the day requires you to be present with everything else. This is the smallest and most accessible version of the daily rest provision, and it tends to change the interior orientation of the entire day in ways that are disproportionate to the brevity of the practice. The person who begins the day from a moment of genuine quiet tends to carry something different through the hours than the person who is immediately immersed in the demands from the moment of waking. Begin there, just there. 3 minutes of genuine stillness before the day begins. The second practice is the transition pause. Between the major sections of the day, between the morning work and the afternoon, between the work hours and the home hours, between the active season and the sleep, take a brief and genuine moment of stopping. Not a lengthy interruption, a moment of genuine transition, of consciously releasing what the previous section held and consciously receiving what the next section requires. A breath, a brief prayer, a moment of acknowledging what is present in the interior and releasing what needs to be released before moving into what comes next. These transition pauses do not require significant time. They require significant intention, the deliberate choosing to not simply carry the previous section directly into the next one, but to genuinely pause between them and let the interior shift before the shift of context demands it. The third practice is the protected evening. Choose a time in the evening, a specific and consistent time after which the work stops. Not the time when you run out of energy, a chosen time, a line that is drawn not by exhaustion, but by intention. After this time, the work does not continue, the problem does not get reviewed one more time, the message does not get sent, the next day's preparation does not begin. After this time, the interior begins, the gentle and gradual process of releasing the day and preparing for the genuine rest of the night. What happens in that protected evening can be many things. Rest that is genuinely restful for you specifically. But what does not happen is more work. The protected evening is the training of the interior and the practice of stopping before the collapse requires it. The building of the daily boundary between the active season and the recovery season that the sustainable life requires. The fourth practice is the weekly provision. Identify one day or one significant portion of one day in each week that is genuinely and consistently different from the work days. Protect it. Put it in the calendar as the non-negotiable it is. Let the people who might lay claim to it know that this time is not available for the work-related things that would otherwise consume it. And in that protected day, engage genuinely with what restores you, the specific things in your specific life that give back to the interior rather than drawing from it. Let this become the consistent and reliable provision of the weekly rest that the Sabbath principle was designed to produce, the regular and recurring restoration that the sustainable work requires. The fifth practice is the honest assessment. At the end of each week, spend a few minutes in honest reflection. Did I genuinely rest this week? Did I protect the provision that was needed? Did the guilt or the pressure or the next demand compromise what I had set aside for the restoration? And if the answer is yes, not with self-condemnation, but with honest recognition, what can be adjusted for the coming week? The honest assessment is not the measuring of performance against a standard. It is the genuine and caring attention to what the interior actually received and what it still needs, the listening to the body and the spirit that the practicing of rest makes possible as you become more genuinely attentive to what the design requires. Type, "I lay down my striving and rest in His grace" in the comments. Let that be your declaration that you are beginning, however imperfectly and however incompletely, to build the practices of genuine rest into the actual structure of your actual life. That you are choosing to take seriously what the design requires and what the love of the one who designed you is inviting you to receive. And if this message has guided you, strengthened you, and helped you see your path clearly, then like, subscribe, and share this message, and support this ministry through the link given below so others can receive this message at the right time. I want to speak about the transition, about what it actually feels like to begin learning genuine rest when you have been driven for a long time, because the beginning of a new rhythm almost never feels the way the established rhythm will eventually feel, and the discomfort of the beginning has caused many people to conclude that rest is not for them or does not work for them, when what they were actually experiencing was simply the honest difficulty of the learning, rather than evidence that the learning was not possible. The first thing you will likely experience when you begin to genuinely rest is discomfort. Not the discomfort of something going wrong, but the discomfort of something unfamiliar, the interior's honest response to the changing of a well-established pattern. The person who has been in motion for years does not simply become at peace with stillness the first time they stop. The interior that has been organized around the work and the managing and the producing does not immediately know what to do with the stopping. It reaches for the next thing. It generates the list of what is not getting done. It produces the anxiety that says the stopping is a mistake. It offers the guilt that says this is irresponsible. All of this is normal. All of it is the predictable response of an interior that has been shaped by the motion and that needs time and repetition and the accumulation of evidence that the stopping is genuinely safe before it becomes genuinely comfortable in the stillness. The discomfort is not the sign that you are doing rest incorrectly. It is the sign that you are doing it for the first time. And the first times of anything genuinely new tend to be genuinely uncomfortable. The second thing you will likely experience is the surfacing of what the busyness was covering. When the motion stops, when the noise reduces, when the constant input and the constant output cease for a season, the interior begins to surface things that the busyness was keeping below the level of conscious awareness. The grief that was being managed by staying too busy to feel it, the fear that was being outrun by the forward motion, the loneliness that the productivity was filling, the questions about meaning and purpose and worth that the achieving was temporarily answering. These things rising into awareness can feel like the rest is making things worse rather than better, like the stopping has opened something that the going was keeping closed. But what is actually happening is that the rest is creating the conditions in which what has been suppressed can finally surface to be genuinely addressed, and the surfacing, however uncomfortable, is the beginning of the healing that the suppression was preventing. Bring what surfaces to me. Let it be named. Let it be held. Let the rest be the context in which the things that needed attending finally receive it. The third thing you will likely experience is a recalibration of what feels normal. The chronic exhaustion that has been accepted as the baseline condition of your life has normalized a level of depletion that the design never intended, and as the rest begins to genuinely restore what was depleted, what feels normal begins to shift. You begin to discover what it feels like to not be carrying the weight that has been so consistently present that you stopped registering it as weight. You begin to have access to a quality of interior that you may not have experienced in a long time, perhaps since before the driven season began. And this recalibration can itself be disorienting, because the new baseline is so different from what you have been accustomed to that it feels almost suspicious. Almost too good to be the permanent condition rather than a temporary anomaly. Let it settle. Let the new baseline become familiar. Let the discovery of what genuine restoration feels like be the evidence you needed that the rest is actually doing what I said it would do. The fourth thing you will experience is resistance from the environment. Not everyone around you will celebrate your choosing of genuine rest. The systems and the people and the expectations that have been organized around the version of you that was always available and always producing will not automatically adjust to accommodate the version of you that is protecting the rest that the sustainable life requires. There will be pushback. There will be the disappointment of people who expected more from you. There will be the systems that continue to demand what you are no longer willing to give without limit. Navigating this resistance is part of the transition, and it requires the clarity of knowing why the rest is not negotiable and the courage to hold the boundary even when the holding is costly. I am with you in that navigation, and what you are protecting is worth what the protecting costs. Type, "I am still before you, Lord, and you are moving for me," in the comments. Let that be your declaration for the season of the transition, the choosing of the stillness. Even when the stillness is uncomfortable, the trusting that what you are not moving to fix while you are resting is being moved by the one who never rests and who is working on your behalf in the space that your resting creates. I want to speak directly now into the specific lies and the specific fears and the specific false beliefs that have been keeping you from the rest I have been describing, addressing each one with what is actually true, because the rest takes root more fully when the specific things that have been preventing it are addressed specifically and honestly. Let each of these declarations land where they are aimed. Let the truth go deeper than the habit. Let what I say displace what the fear and the culture and the inner voice of productivity have been saying. To the belief that you will fall behind if you rest, I say you are already falling behind on what matters most, because the chronic depletion that the rest refusal is producing is reducing your capacity for the very things that genuinely matter. The rest does not put you behind. It restores what the falling behind of depletion is already costing. The person who rests consistently is further ahead in what actually counts than the person who never stops, because the quality of the rested engagement with what matters is greater than the quantity of the depleted straining against it. To the belief that your worth depends on your productivity, I say your worth was established before you produced anything, and it does not fluctuate with your output. I made you. I love you. That love is not a function of your productivity and cannot be increased by more work or decreased by genuine rest. The worth that the productivity has been trying to secure is already yours, given freely, not earned by effort. The rest does not reduce your worth. It reveals that your worth was never in the production. To the belief that the things you are responsible for will collapse if you stop, I say what I am sustaining will be sustained without your continuous effort. The things that are genuinely mine to hold will be held while you rest. The things that would genuinely collapse without your constant support may need to develop the capacity to stand more firmly rather than being perpetually held up by your exhausted hands. Release them to me. Let them reveal their own capacity for standing, and let me show you what is genuinely your responsibility to carry and what has defaulted to you in ways that were never part of my intention for your life. To the belief that rest is selfish, I say the rest that restores the giver is one of the most genuinely loving choices available in a life of genuine giving. The person who gives without replenishing gives less and less of genuine value over time. The rest is not the taking from those who need you. It is the filling of what they need from you, the returning of the capacity that the giving was drawing down, the provision of the sustainable love over the depleting performance of it. To the belief that you have rested before and it did not produce the restoration you hoped for, I say what you rested with was likely one of the counterfeits I described rather than the genuine rest I am inviting you to now. The genuine rest that I produce in the genuine stopping is different from the incomplete rest of the incomplete stop. The entertainment disguised as rest, the performative Sabbath that looks like the genuine thing but does not produce its restoration. Come to the genuine rest, the rest that is honestly and completely still, that genuinely releases the interior to me, that truly opens to what I am giving in the quiet. That rest has not failed you because you have not yet fully received it. To the belief that you will feel guilty the entire time you are resting and therefore the rest will not actually be restful. I say the guilt is real, and I am not dismissing it. And the guilt can be brought to me along with the rest. And what I give in the space of the honest bringing of the guilt is the specific reassurance and the specific permission that the guilt was demanding before it would release its grip. Bring me the guilt, let it be named, and then let me speak into it what I have been speaking in this message. The specific truth that addresses the specific lie the guilt has been repeating. The guilt does not disqualify the rest. The rest is what eventually addresses the guilt. To the whole of you, the tired and the driven and the guilty and the person who has been performing strength they do not have for longer than the performance was sustainable, I say you have my full permission, my explicit invitation, my genuine and specific desire for you to stop. Not when the work is finished, not when the need is less pressing, not when the circumstances have become more suitable. Now, in the middle of everything, with all the valid reasons for continuing to continue still present and still real. Stop, rest, receive what I have prepared for you in the stopping. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not abandoning what matters. You are responding to my invitation with the trust it deserves and the obedience it requires. Rest is not weakness. It is where I restore you, and the restoration is ready. And you are welcome into it. Type every word you speak over my rest I receive in the comments. Let that be your declaration that you are receiving the truth that has been spoken in this message, that the lies that have kept you from the rest are being displaced by what I have said, that you are choosing to believe what God says about rest over what the culture and the fear and the inner voice of productivity have been saying. I want to bring you to an actual moment of rest right now, not as a future intention or a scheduled provision, but as something real and available in this specific moment as you receive these words. Because everything I have described in this message, the restoration and the healing and the speaking and the preparing that I do in the genuine rest, is not primarily information to be noted and applied later. It is an invitation to experience. And the experience is available to you right now, in whatever circumstances you find yourself in, as you read these words, in the middle of the busy day, or the sleepless night, or the ordinary afternoon that has been asking too much of you for too long. I want to ask you to do something simple and perhaps unfamiliar. I want you to stop, not for a long time, not in a way that requires special conditions or a particular setting or a prepared interior state. Simply stop. Stop the forward motion of the reading for long enough to let the reading become something more than information passing through the mind. Let these words that have been speaking about rest actually produce a moment of it, a genuine and brief stopping in which what has been building in you through this message can become present and available for the actual receiving I have been describing. Let your body participate in this stopping. If you are able, let your shoulders release slightly from where they have been held. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands, if they have been tense, open slightly. Let a breath come that is slower and deeper than the breath of the forward motion, a breath that goes all the way down into the lower body, rather than staying in the chest. And let the exhale be as complete as the inhale. This is not a technique. It is the body's participation in what the spirit is being invited into, the physical cooperation with the genuine stopping, the enactment in the body of what the interior is choosing. Let the interior go as quiet as it is able to go in this moment, not forcing a blank mind or achieving a particular meditative state. Simply allowing the noise to reduce to whatever level it is willing to reduce to right now, in this specific moment, with your specific history and your specific interior and your specific amount of practice in the genuine stopping. It may reduce only slightly. The thoughts may still be present and the guilt may still be speaking, and the list of what is not getting done may still be audible in the background. That is fine. You are not required to achieve silence before the rest is available. You are only required to be willing to open the interior as much as it is currently able to open, and to let me meet you at exactly that level of opening with exactly what you are able to receive in this moment. And now turn toward me. In the interior way that is the essential gesture of the receiving, simply acknowledge my presence in this specific moment of your specific day. I am here. I am here. Not in the abstract theological sense, but specifically in the room you are in the moment you are in, aware of every detail of what you have been carrying and what you need and what I have prepared for you in this stopping. You are not bringing me new information. You are simply turning toward the one who has been present all along and who has been waiting for you to turn, to stop the motion long enough to receive what the motion has been preventing, and receive. That is all. Not produce, not perform, not achieve a particular quality of spiritual experience that validates the stopping. Simply receive. Let what I am giving in this moment of genuine stopping be given. It may come as a quality of warmth in the interior. It may come as a fractional quieting of the loudest noise. It may come as a specific thought that arrives with the quality of something given rather than something generated, a word that is more accurate and more gentle than what you would have said to yourself. It may come as nothing that can be identified as a specific experience, but as a quality of the moment that is slightly different from the quality of the moment before it, a sense that something has shifted, however subtly, that the interior is slightly less alone in what it has been carrying. Whatever arrives, let it be enough. Do not demand more of this moment than it is able to give. Do not assess it against what you hope that genuine rest would feel like and find it insufficient. Receive what is given in this moment, and then, when the moment of this specific stopping is complete, carry it forward with you into the next moment of your day. Carry the memory of having stopped and having received, however briefly and however imperfectly, as the first evidence that the genuine rest I have been describing is actually available to you, actually produces something when you actually open to it, actually worth making room for in the structure of your life going forward. Type, I enter into your rest, right now, in the comments. Let that be your declaration, not of a future intention, but of a present choosing. The declaration that you are receiving what is available in this moment, that you are entering the rest that is genuinely open to you right now, that something is happening in this stopping that is real and worth honoring. We have come to the end of this time together, and I want to close not by summarizing what has been said, but by sending you forward with the permission that has been spoken over you in this time, still active, still ringing in the interior, still doing what it was sent to do in the specific places where the lie about rest has been living. Because what has been spoken here is not only information about rest, it is the specific and personal permission of the one who designed you for the rhythm of rest and work, who modeled it in the first week of creation, who commanded it for his people, who demonstrated it in the life of his son, and who is saying it directly to you now, in the specific exhaustion of your specific life. You may stop. You may receive. Your rest is not weakness. It is where I restore you. You came to these words tired. I know that. Not simply the tiredness of a single difficult day, but the tiredness that has been accumulating through the days and the seasons of the sustained overextension, the particular tiredness of a person who has been giving beyond their capacity to give without genuine replenishment, who has been performing a strength they do not have, who has been carrying what the design never intended to be carried indefinitely without the regular and genuine provision of the restoration the carrying requires. That tiredness is real. It has been real for longer than you have fully acknowledged, and I have seen it all, every tired morning, and every depleted afternoon, and every evening when the energy was gone, before the obligations were, and I have been preparing the rest that the tiredness needs throughout all of it. I want you to leave this message with one truth settled more deeply than it was when you arrived. Rest is not what you earn when the work is finished. It is what I give so that the work can continue to be genuinely itself. It is the filling of the vessel that the pouring out requires. It is the hearing that the speaking has been preparing. It is the receiving that the giving was always meant to be balanced by. It is the place where I do my most significant and most personal work in your interior, the work that cannot happen in the motion, that requires the stopping to begin, that has been waiting in the quiet for you to arrive. And you are arriving, even now, in the receiving of these words, in the permission you have been giving yourself, as this message has spoken into the guilt and the lies and the exhaustion that have been keeping you from the rest. You are arriving. And what is waiting for you there is good. I want to say something to the specific tiredness you are carrying right now, not generically, but personally. I see it. I know its specific weight and its specific history and the specific people and responsibilities and wounds and commitments that have contributed to its accumulation. I am not asking you to perform strength you do not have. I am not asking you to push through one more time from the reserves that have already been overdrawn. I am asking you to stop. I am asking you to bring the tiredness to me and to let me do what the tiredness needs, which is not more of your effort, but the genuine receiving of my restoration. The tiredness that has been driving the performance is the very thing I am reaching toward right now. Let it be here. Let it be acknowledged. Let it be received not as a failure, but as the honest signal of the design that says, you were made for the rhythm, and the rhythm has been disrupted, and the disruption is what I am calling you back from into the rest that was always yours. Go forward from here with the rest as a priority rather than a luxury. Go forward with the permission I have given you, ringing louder than the guilt that has been keeping you from what you need. Go forward with the practices, however small and however imperfect at first, of building the genuine stopping into the actual structure of your actual days. Go forward knowing that what you rest from is held by me, that the things that seem to require your continuous effort are genuinely in my hands when you step back from the straining, that the world does not collapse in the hours of your genuine rest, but continues to be held by the one who holds everything and who is never waiting for your exhausted effort to keep it together. And go forward knowing that I am not asking for the perfect rest before I begin the restoration. I am not requiring a particular quality of stillness, or a particular absence of the guilt, or a particular spiritual readiness before the work of the rest begins in you. I begin in whatever opening is available. The smallest moment of genuine stopping is an opening I can work with. The briefest turn toward me in the middle of the tired day is the beginning of the receiving. The first imperfect and guilty and anxious attempt at genuine rest is the beginning of the rhythm that will become more natural with every repetition. I meet you where you are, in the stopping as it is actually available to you, not as it theoretically should be. And I do what I do in every genuine opening that is offered to me, which is to give what the opening was made to receive. Rest, my child. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not the abandoning of what matters or the failure of the faithful. It is the honoring of the design I put in you, the receiving of the gift I have been holding ready, the trusting that what you release into my hands while you rest is held completely and worked with thoroughly and returned to you in a form more genuinely useful than what the exhausted effort was producing. Rest. It is where I restore you, and the restoration has already begun. Type I rest in you now and always in the comments as your final declaration. Let that be the statement you carry out of this encounter and into the actual rhythms of your actual life, the choosing of the rest as the genuine and non-negotiable provision that the life I have for you requires, the opening of your hands to what has been prepared for you in the stopping that love and wisdom and the design of your Maker have always been inviting you into. And if this message has guided you, strengthened you, and helped you see your path clearly, then like, subscribe, and share this message, and support this ministry through the link given below so others can receive this message at the right time.